Hi, everyone. You ever have those moments where you realize how truly incongruent, because that's been a word, especially with one of my clients, being incongruent, incongruency. And I even said in one of my posts, if you're not recognizing both sides of the coin, you're robbing yourself. And that has to do with incongruence. Because we have these moments of inner conflict and indecision and battling ourselves, and seeking validation because we're in this battle with ourselves and, seeking advice, guidance, reading self-help books because we lost our sense of self, because we lost ourselves. And I think it was yesterday I was talking about recognizing the Merkaba, the 3D like vehicle that we inhabit, energetic vehicle we inhabit, the first one that you build as you begin to ascend and raise your vibration. When you truly marry and work with both your masculine and feminine sides in incongruence with one another. But, the Merkaba is kind of a means of triangulation in a 3D space. It allows you the ability to locate yourself, to find yourself wherever you are in the midst of chaos, in the middle of the void, in the middle of 3D space, the third dimension. You're able to find yourself and locate yourself and where your center is through the Merkaba. And I find looking at it from that perspective absolutely beautiful and a great reminder in order to catch yourself, in order to spot yourself and get to a place of non-comparative, non-judgmental, non-conforming aspects of self. Because one reason we become so incongruent and so out of our depth, out of our center, is we started looking outside of ourselves. We started identifying and categorizing others based off of the abilities we perceive them to have, the abilities or the qualities that we perceive them to have, which may not be 100% the truth or their truth, but we're assigning these things to them because we feel we lack in them or we don't have the potential for them. And so we give up that potential to others. We give up those abilities to others, creating an inferiority complex. And the opposite could be said with a superiority complex, is that I see others without, therefore I have those things because they are without them. And so it's this game of figuring out, okay, well, what do you have versus what do I have? This game of comparisons, when ultimately it's us trying to figure out our place and figure out ourselves, figure out our identity. And that's one reason some of us, I think, especially in this culture where we've been so consumed by the things we consume, that we take on so many roles, so many hats, so many shells or costumes, because there are so many needs to be met out there. There's so many more ways that we are able to connect, so many ways in which our abilities can be either heightened or could be present or non-existent altogether. And it's important to recognize this. And that's why it's important to not compare and not to judge, and not to try to conform, because then it's us creating this, doing this contortion act of the self where we end up in uncomfortable places and our body ends up holding tension or holding poses or holding, different, our mind holds different angles through which we perceive the world, through which we perceive our experience. And so it's important to understand that and adjust correctly when necessary, because we hold so many opportunities and potentials within us, and we all come onto this plane of existence with a gift, with a talent that we knew about and we didn't even think about when we were young, when we were children, and that's why some of the work starts there. It's because that's when we're forming opinions and getting, obtaining, observing the world around us, and creating those opinions and understandings of self operating in the outside world, because we're seeing other versions of ourself operating in the outside world and seeing what works for them, what doesn't work for them, seeing what works, experiencing what works for us, what doesn't work for us, and then comparing it to what works for others. And then from there, deciding whether or not we have a problem, deciding whether or not we're gifted. And so that's kind of where it begins. And one reason it's so important to have a sense of play, a sense of curiosity, to invite that inner child with you, is then you can still play that game of observation, but it becomes a game. It becomes fun. You get curious, and you invite yourself to play all of these different games and invite yourself to choose all of these different experiences without them being you. But instead, as we grow up, we're forced to kind of be like, what are you going to do when you grow up? What are you going to do when you grow up? What are you going to do when you grow up? And so we're then pressured to take on certain roles, and to value certain abilities, certain acts of usefulness, to define ourselves, because that's ultimately going to define our quality of life, right? And so sometimes we're pressured to take on different roles based off of others' experiences, through their advice, through their guidance, right? As opposed to us having that extra time to explore our own natural talents and gifts and purpose, to feel more wholly ourselves, and instead of taking on all of these other auxiliary identities or means of self-identification, of validation, within this world, outside validation, mind you. And so we end up trading so much of ourselves in order to create a lifestyle, in order to earn a living, so to speak. And that's where we end up betraying ourselves at the end of the day. And so when it goes back to, okay, when we're attempting to make a decision, or there's something we do want versus what feels safe, it's because we've created some type of value system that is incongruent with who we are and what we actually would want to choose, what we actually desire to choose, as opposed to what the rules of the game, that outside force, that external force, has validated and labeled as correct for us, if that makes sense. So when we're met with these times of indecision, it's really because we're having some type of battle within ourselves, within our cell. And so we get concerned about where our energy is going to go, especially if we've been going along a path that depletes us of our life force, of our energy, because we're exchanging it for something that doesn't fill us up or recharge us in the same type of way. So again, going back to energetic currency, going back to power play. So kind of looking at it from that mundane, normal perspective, beyond, looking at the political or socioeconomic or, and larger theaters of human existence, really taking it back and scaling it down to our individualized experience, what a power play is. And that in itself is a power play, is us all believing and feeding into certain beliefs that were constructed based on external forces, and not ones that were cultivated from our interior workspace, from our interior time space. I will even say that. So we leave our own spirit out of the equation, our own soul out of the equation, and therefore end up creating these empty shells of life, these one-sided, one-dimensional ideas of how life is supposed to work. And so trying to figure everyone else out, we kind of leave ourselves out of the picture. And so this is kind of, I'm charging you all with, who are you outside of the roles that you've taken on? And to take it even a step further, how are the roles that you've taken on that perhaps you can't take back? Like being a parent, or, being a teacher, things like that, different roles. What roles do you end up resenting that you feel like take away from you? And instead, how can you be empowered in that choice that you took on? And if that isn't possible, is there another choice or role out there that you would much prefer to transfer your currency toward? And if so, like, understand that the universe is going to knock at your door and offer you opportunities to keep going back, to be like, are you sure? Because you're burning off, you're working off, you're exchanging that energy of being uncertain, of being incongruent, of being indecisive, of being questioning, of questioning and doubting. And so as that's burning off, it's going back into the universe, and it's going to show up back to you. And it's going to get weaker and weaker the more that you resist it, and the more that you say no, and the more that you choose in the direction that you want to go. So that's what wobble is. Because sometimes I talk about wobble. And sometimes that's what the wobble is. It's shifting, it's transferring your energetic currency into a different account. But the old account still has some currency in it, but that shifting, it's like, oh, wait, are you sure you want to do this? It's kind of like when you actually transfer money, it's like, you sure you want to do this? What's the amount? Write a memo, and it's double checking to confirm with you that that's what you want. And so don't take it as an affront. Don't take it as a means to doubt yourself. It's like, this is just you, depleting that former account and investing in the new one, investing in you. Divesting from that account and investing in yourself. So yeah, I wanted to share that really quick. It was just something that I was kind of considering, and bringing it back to yourself and who you truly are. Strip yourself of all of the roles that were kind of imposed upon you based off of that external viewpoint or that external force. Because one thing about spirituality is when you enter it, it meets you where you're at. It meets you where you're at. And typically we're at a place where we place a lot of importance on the external world, on the physical, on the material. We're very materialistic even when we enter the spiritual space. And so any type of teaching that exists is going to meet you in that space and is going to teach you from that external space, from that external force. But anyone that puts too much importance on that and wants to teach you that that external space is all that is hiding or blocking you for something, is gatekeeping. And you may be gatekeeping yourself in believing that that is the only force worth exchanging with, because in all actuality, it's you. It's all some type of anecdotal, allegorical, metaphorical story, or just kind of means to get you to recognize those archetypes or those energies or those aspects of yourself, those angles that you can see yourself. So it goes back to perspective. And so if you're still in the beginnings of understanding yourself and the world from a spiritual perspective, take that into account, that everything that is being explained and told in an external sense is meant to reflect that internal experience. And so it's up to you to connect with that on a different, deeper undercurrent, deeper level, because that is ultimately what causes those effects, what causes a lot of the things that you seek within a certain spiritual path. So before I get too off topic, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of share some of that. So be really aware of your viewpoint, your perspective, your judgments on the outside world, because that that's affecting you, more than just like judge and you shall be judged, but it's like judge and you're positioning yourself in a certain way with each judgment, with each observation that you make. You're manifesting or creating something that you alone have to deal with and have to face, and that you alone will deal with and will face and will work through or attempt to escape. So it's very important to have that awareness and be cognizant of it, and to reconcile any place where there is imbalance, and perhaps you may be positioning yourself in a less than ideal space for you personally. So something to think about on a Thursday afternoon. All right. Well, I'm going to let you all go now. Thank you so much for just tuning in and listening and joining me in this time. Yeah, I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.